We're live and recording for another exciting episode of Leader Speak, Vitrina's podcast series, where we talk to innovators, thought leaders, and CXOs around the world on business innovation in the industry, technological innovation, or just workflow and supply chain innovation within the entertainment business. Today, we're fortunate to actually have a very exciting conversation who actually sort of brings in the best of multiple worlds, for sure in film and content creation, but also in financial management and just good financial discipline and making this into a roaring business. We are talking to Kirsty Bell, who's the founder CEO of Goldfinch. She's joining us all the way from the United Kingdom, and somewhere in the Northeast in the hills is how she described where she is. Kirsty, what a pleasure to have you today joining us in the Vitrina community and this discussion.
Thank you very much for having me. And it's my pleasure entirely to talk about best practice in this industry, which is currently going through some big changes which are necessary.
That's right. And that is so true, actually, just in terms of, all the transformations that are happening, technological, business, globalization, and then, of course, the whole revenue engine, especially with the digital sort of revolution that's kind of in our midst. Kirsty, one aspect that we would love to sort of get started with is just the journey, of Goldfinch. And how did it come about? How did you move from the financial world into content creation and content production?
Yes, I don't know whether it was a clever move or a very stupid move, but it came about. I'd been a partner in a top 10 accountancy firm for a few years, and specializing in strategic tax and media and property. And I left and had my own consultancy business and did the same specialization. Long story short, after 9 years of doing that, I decided to make a film, would you believe? And in the northeast of England, and I raised the money, and it was shot in the depths of winter up here, and it was the worst winter we'd had for decades. It was night shoots for 5 weeks. I was not supposed to be the producer. I ended up being the producer in prep. The producer disappeared, and I learned so much in that space of time. And what I learned is that I believe that the independent film industry, and funny, when we were talking before we started to record, we were talking about this, needed more structure from a business perspective. And what I'd done for 9 years was business consultancy with a tax edge. And I thought to myself, somebody needs to come into this industry, and if they're going to shake it up, they'll shake it up. But there needs to be more emphasis on the business side of show business. At the moment, at that point in time, which is nearly 13 years ago, would you believe, it was more on the show and less on the business. There was a lot more investor money around. There was a lot more incentives around for investors to actually physically invest from a tax incentive perspective. So I turned around to my husband and I said, I want to go to London and I want to set up something that's going to disrupt the independent film industry. And he said, are you mad? Are you actually crazy? You've got a business already and you've got your life up here and all the rest of it. And I said, look, if I don't do it now, then I'll always wonder what if. And I've always been told that I should try and do my very best. So he went, how long we're going to be doing this for? And I said, well, go for 2 years and I'll get 4 films done the right way. And then I'll come home. And we're 13 years down. We're in our 12th year of Goldfinch. So that is how Goldfinch happened. I saw everything that went wrong could go wrong. And I wanted to put operations in place that could hopefully add something or help save the independent film industry in some way, shape or form.
Oh wow!
So
that is
So that was a big idea. That was a big idea. That was if I could redefine it, then that's what I would do. And then what I found out is that people don't like change, do they? They don't like disruption. They don't like change, just like in any industry. It's like, oh my God, like, gosh, how are we going to cope with this person who's turning a mirror and showing us everything that we don't really want to pay attention to? We'll just continue making things in the way that we've always made them. And as we've seen with the pandemic, and also with the demise of some of the sales agencies and some of the distribution companies as a result of that, some of the production companies, and because the industry has been a little bit like a dinosaur refusing to evolve, then we're left with a situation where disruptors are gaining ground, greatly. And people who are looking at the business model of the industry are actually evolving better and becoming stronger. And that's what Goldfinch and the team and my COO, Phil McKenzie, is doing on the international side of things. That is what we're trying to do. And it's not going, look, we're doing it right all the time. We've tried certain things and come away from them or gone into a different avenue. But this industry is about being creative. So why not be creative on the business side of things as well, is what we think.
That's a fascinating story of entrepreneurship as well as risk taking, but also just the belief that there could be a better set of outcomes, especially on the business side, if this entire journey is managed better, right?
Yeah. And you don't make money from everything you do in this industry. It's finding out what is the most commercial avenue for you to go down, and also trying those different markets and doing it in an assessed risk way. So it's not like, oh, we'll just spend X on doing this operation. It's working out what are you actually risking within that. And from our team, from within Goldfinch, which spreads all over the world, because film is really unusual. It's a true global business. People think it's based in LA or London or Delhi or wherever. It's not. It is truly global. Sales are truly global. So it's almost like having a very large public limited company, but we're not a very large public limited company. We're very small in context, but it's almost having that engine. And it's trying to see what you can do on that world stage. And to me, that's fascinating. It gets your imagination going in all ways, shapes and forms, because there's different things work in different territories. What short form content might work in the Middle East and Asia, but it might not work yet in America and the UK. You've got to look at what works where, because some of those markets prefer TV stuff, like Spain and South America. So it's finding what works where and for the best return on what you're spending. As we were talking before, it's manufacturing, isn't it? So what are we manufacturing and in what market are we manufacturing it for?
That's right. That is absolutely right. But Kirsty, there's always a section in our podcast interview about the company's elevator pitch. So today, 13 years later, what Goldfinch has become or turned into, how would you sort of describe what the company represents, what its body of work is, how many projects do you do in a year? If you can give some sort of a flavor to that'd be awesome.
I think if I was going to be in an elevator with you at the moment, I'd probably hope it got stuck, so I had a little bit extra time or stop on a few floors.
Please. It's a very long skyscraper, so it's a very long elevator journey.
Yeah, we're essentially a creative powerhouse that bridges art and enterprise and finance. We've got infrastructure to die for. We've been around for 12 years with a track record deploying over $250 million into 300 plus projects with a 0% default. That's my best bit elevate on print in managed structures. Yeah. it's a two-speed engine as well. If you're talking about from a manufacturing perspective, we've got our core UK production, finance, and services that we supply in the UK, and then we've got Goldfinch International, which is scaling a creative economy platform across global South, being MENA, Asia, Africa, through debt funding, studio hubs, venture accelerator, talent pipelines, sports content, and distribution bridges. We're also developing our distribution and demand flywheel, as I would call it. We've got links to Myco, which has got a huge footprint in MENA, Asia, sports and ad-supported streaming. And that's been a total disruptor as well, which Phil, my CEO, is one of the co-founders of. And that gives us really good data, real data on audience and monetization. And it also about de-risking content lending and equity. And then we've got some new rails. We've got our AI native IP system through and Engine 3. I've got tokenized structured products, and Vault, which is a project with Goldfinch International and Virtue for branded entertainment, converting brand budgets into IP assets, which is something that Bond started to do in 1960 with Dr. No, where there was over 60 product placements, would you believe?
That's right.
And it's something that people have talked a lot about in the industry, but I think the opportunity now, especially with vertical series, is huge for those brands. For me, that is a really exciting way of looking at it. Out of our 300 projects back, we've got multiple award winners, including An Irish Goodbye, which is an Oscar and BAFTA winner, short film. And we've got our First Flights program, which helps first-time filmmakers. So our model is we invest in storytellers, not just stories, but we invest in a return on our investment. So there you go.
That is fascinating. That is fascinating. Again, there are so many aspects of what you just said that both are in the traditional realm, but also in the transformation sort of realities as well. And you know, a lot of these brand partnerships that you talked about, the programs to sort of really get filmmakers to sort of, you know, develop in their journey, right? And again, you know, folks who are super passionate about a project on the creative side do need a lot of the operational and financial and business acumen to be sort of sharpened for sure.
When I set up Goldfinch, I didn't really know how it was going to grow or how it was going to evolve. You know, you've obviously got your plan that you want to follow, but then day one happens, and that plan has to evolve and mutate as well. And I basically, Goldfinch, when it first set up, is not what Goldfinch is today. And originally we raised money for third-party producers. And the number of producers that used to come and sit in front of me, and you'd say to them, so what's the budget for your film? Oh, it's 5 million. Every single time, 5 million. Wow. And I used to say, that's really weird, because I had somebody in an hour ago who had exactly the same budget. It must be the same plan. And it's like they just didn't have a clue. Or if they did have a clue, they just used 3 million, 5 million. And then after the pandemic, it became 2 million or 3 million. And it's like, when you're speaking to somebody like myself who's got financial expertise, please don't try and fudge the issue here on the numbers. What you've got to do is be able to stand beside your project, which when you break it down, like the line producer does and the schedule and the first AD, they come up with the numbers, they come up with everything. And that is what you should be telling me, not something you've just picked off the top of your head. I would rather hear, I haven't done a budget yet. And then we know where we're standing from. So I think that often finance and accounting were seen to be areas of filmmaking that people didn't want to associate themselves with, that it wasn't cool. It was really cool to be creative and be really arty and have these wonderful creative ideas. But to say that you spent your time in front of a spreadsheet and doing finance, etc., then I really don't think people wanted to hear about that. Yeah.
Right. No, I can totally relate to that. Again, we speak to a whole host of content financiers, commissioners, and one of the biggest angst that comes out is really the budgets and how strong has that sort of input been for that project. So I can totally relate to
Yeah,
that.
and also if you're going out to raise money on the back of that budget, where is the money being spent? Is it going to be spent on the screen here? Are we going to actually get value for money here? Are we going to see what we're spending? Or is it going to go in the pockets of people who actually aren't impacting
Yeah.
on whatever appears on the screen? Also, if you're making a horror film, will the sales of that horror film equate to what you're spending on the budget?
Right.
Documentaries exactly the same.
Yeah.
What's really interesting to me is the things like the vertical series, where that can be a cost-cutting exercise, really, because you're going to spend less days filming. So ideally, the budget will come down. And the way that you distribute the vertical series can mean that you can get a lot more times your budget back in sales. If you're going to spend 10, 15, 20, 25 million on making a feature film that has no distribution outlet, where are you going to get your return from? So it's a bit like if you're going to build something and you haven't decided what your audience is or where that distribution policy is going to be, why are you making it in the first place? If it's a passion project, I always get wary when I'm speaking to people about passion projects. I mean, we've got our own in Goldfinch, but they've all got a financial basis before they're ever greenlit. They're not greenlit just because it's a good idea. We've got loads of good ideas. There's so many good ideas out there. It's how they're put into practice that's the most important thing.
That's right. That's right. No, I again, all of that resonates with what we've been hearing. But again, I think you with your financial background, I think I'm hearing the strongest advocacy for just good financial management, just reminding folks that this is a business. I was actually curious, Kirsty, about the different types of financing. And we know that there are some types of financing that's kind of really been stressed at this point. We've had equity financing, debt financing, gap financing. Again, there are all sorts of support that financiers bring in, from a capital perspective. I wanted to understand, how you've seen the evolution in recent days about which type of financing is really stressed. And then, from your play for Goldfinch, what's really the big emphasis and focus?
I think overall financing is fragmenting at the moment in the marketplace. The usual or the historical financial models for putting together your film's budget are definitely not in existence anymore. Traditional investors are very cautious, but new models, as you'd expect, are emerging out of the death of the old model. And that to me is really exciting, especially from my background. So we've got there's a lack of equity financing, but there are still equity financiers out there. And there are people who want to diversify their portfolios, family offices and funds, etc. When they see that companies or businesses like our own, how we are protecting their equity investment and maybe cross-collateralizing it with adding debt funding, which is collateralized on top of the equity finance. What we try to do with any of our projects is we do a deep analysis of what the sales might be, and then we discount it by 60% because we know what the markets can be like. So then what we can show to an investor is this percentage is at risk, this percentage is covered by collateralized debt, whether that be minimum guarantees, pre-sales or tax credits or rebates in whatever jurisdiction that we're operating in. And the gap element, we will put our own money in. So we'll sit alongside you in the gap position. So we'll recoup pro rata pari passu equally at the same time. So what we're trying to do is to try and encourage that private equity crossover by saying you're not putting 100% at risk here. And also, we've got models where we cross-collateralize over a whole of our slate. So, for instance, in our genre label, Dreamtown, we've got a horror and elevator genre, which is basically horror and thrillers. And what we're saying to our high net worth investors is that, look, don't just take a risk on one of these, go over 2 of them or 5 of them or whatever in the next 18 months. So therefore, not only are they getting some of the collateralized debt back in exchange for their equity, but they're also getting, it's almost like you're betting on 5 different horses in the same race. So it's, historically they'll break even and one will be an outlier. So let's just see where we get to. And then you get investor confidence. But we also look at other ways of monetizing our assets through the music side of things, which is often forgotten in independent filmmaking, that you can make money from the score or getting featured artists to be part of that. Also, the gaming world. This was explored by everybody back in 2014, 15, and a lot of governments put a lot of money into it, and then it sort of dissipated. Right. There's a lot of success early on with that, and then it just went, no, we're not doing that anymore. And I think there's a way of bringing that back into play. And I think the brand integrated storytelling we hinted at earlier, I think is a really cool way to start showing brands that they can get eyes on their prize, but also can elevate the amount of money that gets put in by brands. And it could be that brands don't pay anything initially. It's basically product placement or just their logo on the front of the film. But when you've got, the amount of content that we're associated with and we help and executive produce as well as produce internally and direct internally, then you're looking at, wow, if I can get across 10 pieces of content in the next year, that's great, because that's actually far cheaper than advertising on the television or not knowing where my market's going to hit, because this is going to go out on all the platforms, not just one platform. So I think a lot of corporates are thinking differently about the way that they're going to elevate their brands. And I think it's a bit like sports sponsoring. You've got everything on the vest of the sports player or with F1 all over. Well, why not do that with film? It's global. They're global. So why don't you follow suit? Literally.
Right. No, that's fascinating. And again, a lot of what you said, I'm sure resonates a lot with family offices. Again, there is capital available. They just don't know how to deploy that capital in this industry. And I think what you sort of articulating is really music to my ears personally, because again, we want more capital to come into the supply chain, especially on the production side, because if that happens, then the whole supply chain lights up downstream and midstream.
And also, if you can show a model where a family office or a high net worth or a group of high net worths will leave their money in that business to see the returns come through again and again and again, that's the clever way. So not just in one product, in multiple products. And that, to me, is just like the cycle of production and manufacturing. If you can turn that money round and keep that product going round and round and round, then your investors are going to get true returns. There's no point in us saying you're going to get 25% on a project and that's it, because we need them to leave their money in there to do more, to do more, to do more. And that is how we can get this engine working. And, and I don't think that is such a hard ask, really.
Yeah.
It's just being sensible and Yeah, I don't really want to say this, but it's about being not greedy. It's about waiting. These are medium to long term investments, not short term investments. Short term investments would be off the collateralized debt. You turn your money around and you get 12%, 15% or whatever from cash flow and the tax credits, for instance, and that's
Hmm.
great, but it's not
Hmm.
creating an economy, is it? It's just creating
Yes,
a return for you for that one transaction. And that's what we need to do. We need to make creative economies, don't we?
that's right.
We're not making creative economies from the turn of one deal.
That's right. That's right. No, I absolutely. I think one of the exciting aspects is that once the whole business is figured out and the whole production supply chain is figured out, it then can be replicated for a host of other ideas, for a host of other projects, for a host of other markets. So I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
In fact, I was curious about how Goldfinch is structured from that perspective. I mean, are you when you have investors coming in? You talked about family offices, private equity. We have a few of those as part of our network, so your voice will go to them. I'm sure. Hopefully, that turns out to into inbound interest into your fund. How are you structured? Do you manage Goldfinch as a fund, or is it project by project investments? Your relations with your investors, how's that structured?
So we've got a holding company, which is Goldfinch Holdings. And then we have subsidiary companies underneath. And
Okay.
those will have various projects in, or if it is just one project, which generally
Okay.
isn't, it's normally over several. So if you imagine the holding company and then a subsidiary XYZ Limited, and then XYZ Limited will own the SPVs for all of the slate of those projects.
That's it.
So the investor would come in, hopefully, to the subsidiary company.
Right.
But if an investor was only interested in one particular project, they would come direct into that
Into
SPV
that
below
project.
that subsidiary. So we have
Got
tiered situations
right.
that
Right.
and then we've got Goldfinch International, which is a separate business, which is ostensibly for the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. But does work over the rest of the world. And we've also got LLCs in America. We do a lot of work in America. We do a lot of documentary TV projects over there with
Okay.
chosen partners. So we've got the same kind of structure sort of 3 times. And we
That is
find that
fascinating.
works. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
obviously you've got the one, somebody who is a friend of the directors or a friend of whoever who just wants
Right.
to back that person. And they
Right.
will just go into the CAMA, the collections account for that particular film, and we'll do an investor agreement with them. But they won't have a shareholder in the SPV. They will
Right.
just be in the CAMA for
Into that
their
project.
position. So it's about 4 tiers, I would say, on that
Okay.
front.
That's beautiful, and again consistent with how studios also operate.
It's
This is
stolen. It's stolen from the studio system. The way
no,
I
no.
look
This is
after investment in films is stolen from the collection, the Bonder, the Completion Bonder Handbook, literally stolen from the Completion Bonder Handbook. And the way that we've set up our business is borrowed from the studio system.
inspired from that,
Inspired.
but
That's a better word. Inspired.
fascinating. No, this is exciting. Again, our user community and our sort of followers typically come from different backgrounds. There are a host of financiers and private equity and family offices as well. Your voice goes to them just as they are sort of really always thinking about how to enter
Yeah.
into this industry. Uh, I think the struggle for on the investor side is always to back the right vehicles that
Yes.
then can return money but also be well managed
Yeah.
and provide transparency, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
That's right.
And I think it's when you buy it's a bit like when you buy a piece of art, isn't it? You go into a gallery and something draws your attention to a particular piece of art and you go, I
Yeah.
really want that. And you don't want to walk out the gallery and not buy it because you're frightened that somebody else will find it just as lovely as you and you want to buy it. But that is buying a piece of art that's going to sit on your wall forever. You're not looking to sell that immediately. You're not, when you're buying to put in your own house, as opposed to somebody who's buying a piece of art for investment and wants to know why it's an investment, why it's worth something, why that artist is worthy of that, or etc. It's the same with the film. Have you got the right team in place? Can you create the right quality of product for the right price? Can you actually turn around to your investor and say, I have not gone over budget, I'm exactly on budget, or I'm under budget, and I've also got this company and that company and the other company lined up to sell it on a worldwide basis. And I think if we can look at films like commodities, then we're going to have a bit of fun with it. But also, it's going to be really exciting once we get that model down to should be the cost of this particular project, and this will be the return. Then it starts to get interesting within that context, because technology like AI, which we harness, AI is great if you input it into it in the correct way, and it's not going away. So let's harness it and use it in the right way. That can be a cost-cutting exercise in your budget. You can get more content out there. And there's a lot of purists out there as well that'll go, well, it's going to replace this, it's going to replace that, somebody's going to be out of job for this or whatever. But it's a bit like when in the UK, when the mining industry started to fail, people had to train. They had to look at things from a different angle. A good cinematographer will never be out of work, because their creative eye, nobody can replace that, because that comes from their heart and their brain, and that can't be replaced. But cameras that can be more versatile and can walk with the people rather than having to have tracks and this and that and the other, that's a different matter together. That makes independent filmmaking so interesting and so doable, because we can now do something in 3 weeks that we would have taken 4 weeks to do. So we can make more of that. And what we can create, going back to our manufacturing analogy, is we can create a factory. It's a film factory. It's not a studio. It hasn't got 4 million people on the payroll and whatever. It's a factory. It's got people doing the right job in the right place, and they're all reporting to one another and coming together and dealing with it. There's a book by a guy called Richard Scarry. It's a children's book, or Scarry, and it's called What Do People Do All Day? And it's all these cartoon characters in a book that live in a town, and you take off the fronts of the houses and you see what they do. That's the same as Filmland, that everybody's got a role and everybody can help each other to get that done. But unfortunately, in independent filmmaking, everybody's freelance. And what we want to create at Goldfinch is an ecosystem where we've got security of tenure. That we don't go for months not looking for a job as a freelancer, that there's work there on a continuous basis. That's why I give you the factory analogy.
That is fascinating. Kirsty, I wanted to actually sort of double click on that piece, because so the question which I had was just the independent producer who goes through clearly 3 journeys, right, in the entire life cycle. There is pre-greenlighting, the whole budgeting, the planning part, right? Where will the money come from? The tax credits, the raising of funds. Then there is the whole production cycle, and then there's the release cycle, right? Yeah. If we look at those 3 distinct journeys, right? And again, our supply chain sort of analogy, or the manufacturing analogy, is splintered into those 3. And we try to sort of understand how all 3 work from the lens of an independent producer. My question to you was, how does Goldfinch's role change in those 3 journeys, as a partner to the independent producer?
So we are an independent producer, and we do co-productions with other independent producers as well. Right. Goldfinch originally wasn't a producer. We were an executive producer, but we were a hands-on executive producer. Unfortunately, for a lot of producers, we didn't just give them the money and walk away. We were like hands-on in the whole of the process. Yeah. So there's the development stage. So at any one time, we've got multiple projects in development, or that people have approached us with, that we are assessing and putting through our own assessment procedure. We have a weekly meeting with the senior team at Goldfinch, where we go through the ones that have been sent to us. We get over 25 scripts a week. We get a lot of stuff, and you know what? We don't turn anybody away, because you never know what you might find. You just never know what will come through the door. Do we turn a lot away? Yes, because we're looking for something in particular. We're not just looking to do anything. So we've got to decide: do we produce this in-house, or do we get other people to come in and produce it for us? What role does Goldfinch want to play throughout the whole of this process? And in Dreamtown, our genre brand, we will be producing it ourselves and directing it ourselves. So we've got that to take care. And that takes a lot of time. And we will be sitting on the editor as well and making sure that process is. So we do use a couple of other directors, Atul, but it's a very small pool that we fish in. Whereas if somebody comes to us with a co-production, obviously they'll probably have their own director attached, etc., etc. And then we've got documentaries as well, and they take a hell of a long time. So you've got the production. People don't realize, who aren't from the film industry, how long it takes to actually do a project, from development through production, through post-production, through distribution. It's a huge cycle of production, and then you've got to get money in at the other end. So it's a massive undertaking. So what we try and have is something that's being filmed all the time, something that's in post-production all the time. So, and we've got this huge slate that we're developing all the time. So we've got almost like a manufacturing process, if you think about it in that context. And I think from somebody who's coming in to invest in something like that, the first time they see the length of the process, they're astonished, because they assume that once you finish filming, it's going to be a few weeks and then you're going to have a finished film. It doesn't work like that, because you've got a hell of a process to go through. So I would say it's a bit like a pregnancy. It's about 9 months, but it could go to 12 months from start to finish. And have we done it in a shorter length of time? Yes. Have we done it in a longer length of time? Yes, too. Especially documentaries. One I'm directing at the moment about Eddie Cochran, the rock and roll singer. I've been doing that for 2.5 years. And that's for good reason. It's because of all the contributors we've got to interview and all the rest of it. It's virtually, it's 95% finished now. So it's been a huge project. But do I do it every day? No, I do a lot of other things as well. And that is the other thing. Being a producer is having to wear so many hats. It's unreal. You've got to be able to, it's almost like a fashion buyer. You've almost got to sniff out what is going to be popular in 12 months to 18 months time. Because what is on your screens today isn't necessarily going to be what's on your screens in that time frame. So we've got to think ahead the whole time. And that's where the team comes in. The core team is Phil, who I mentioned, Ben Charles Edwards, who's a producer and a director, Sarah, who's been with us since day one of Goldfinch, so she's an original, and myself. So we're the taste master pool, but then we overlay that always with financials, and then if it's lucky, it'll get greenlit, and we go ahead. And that is when it becomes, when the train leaves the station, when you've decided to greenlight a project, all hell breaks loose. It's very exciting, and the two films are never the same as well.
That's right. No, this is, again, you paint a great story with lots of analogies, which is always exciting to. No, this is great. Again, I think as we sort of explain how the business side works, that's always helpful to have analogies. Just make the point and make the connection in one's head. I was actually curious also about the whole revenue model, Kirsty. It's changed. Pre-COVID, pre-Brexit. I don't know if Brexit had an impact, but COVID for sure. And then of course the whole sort of change that's happening with theatrical and linear, as in box office and linear and broadcast. Talk a little bit about how it was, let's say, 10 years ago vis-a-vis how it's today.
Oh,
And I'm yeah,
it's like night and day. I mean, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, even 6 years ago, you had your models where your box office receipts, and then you moved
mm,
on to digital, or from your streamers, etc., etc. You knew what price you were going to get, essentially,
right,
from wherever you were going to sell it. So you knew essentially what you could make your film for and what you would be making. and and it would be very rare that you would get a differential in there. And it was basically before Netflix had their own Netflix originals. They were looking for content. They were paying the same price for every single thing that they had. Same with Amazon. Amazon hasn't changed as much as Netflix. But then we had Brexit, which did affect our industry,
okay,
because obviously UK wasn't part of Europe anymore, but we weren't, and it was like,
yeah,
are we part of this dance, or are we not part of this dance? It was a really strange kind of situation. What
yeah,
COVID did, it allowed the end user, in the sense of the distributor and the sales agents, to flex their muscle and go, oh, the COVID's had a huge impact on our markets, therefore our prices slashed. And I
oh,
remember the first proper Cannes Film Festival after lockdowns, and a sales agent that we knew was who had his office on the Croisette, as all of them do, which cost a fortune. And it was right by, I believe, the Grand Hotel. And there was like a quadrangle where all of them had their banners up, as in for who they were and everything. And one morning he said, I heard it from other people, he got up and went out on his balcony, and he went, so who's going to give me $5,000 for Italy then? Who's going to give me? He says, because it basically become a
wow,
farce. So he was treating it like a farce as a sales agent. And
wow,
when I set up Goldfinch 12 years ago, I was quoted in Screen Daily as saying that if sales agents didn't evolve, they would be like dinosaurs and be extinct in 6
yeah,
years. And I do believe that a lot of sales agents have suffered in the last 5 or 6 years. And
mm,
unfortunately, the main business model now, for distribution, does not bear any resemblance to what it did before.
mm,
I think that I don't think you're still not getting the best price for the content that you're producing. I think there's still a lot of, oh, it's only worth such and such in this territory, or we can't get more than that. And that's why
right,
budget. That's why we set up Dreamtown. Let's do horror content and thriller content, which is a lower value historically, but it gets a very, very regular return on its money. And if we make it cleverly, with the right production value, with the right cast, unfortunately, you still got to have the right cast, you're going to get the
mm,
correct return on your investment. So it's making it for better prices, I think, and
right,
making the content more relevant to what people want to watch out there in the world. People don't
right,
seem to want to have psychological horror. They want horror. There's trends, so you've got to like try and do that, but you're not going to get a lot of pre-sales. There's not a lot of minimum guarantees out there, which puts extra pressure on us as producers to convince the
mm,
family office and the high net worth that we need their money more than ever now, and
right,
we need to do it. And that's why I mentioned earlier about structuring it in a way where it's cross-collateralized over a slate, so they
right.
know that we're thinking about longevity of investment, but in longevity of returns too. I think it's
That's right.
hard. I think it's really hard. But bringing in brands and bringing in, vertical content series and things like that, there's huge
Mm,
opportunities to make content for less, and
mm,
not denigrate the quality at all, and get some real sales. or looking at multiple monetization, as I mentioned earlier, through games or through books and music and all the rest of it, especially on documentaries, that has to be a given. But if you were a student at school at this precise moment in time and looking for a future in the film industry, I think you'd be going, I'm not sure at the moment. I don't know how I'm going to navigate this landscape. And that's why we started our first flights movement in lockdown. Our first one was launched in March 2020. Our first winner was An Irish Goodbye, which is the Oscar and BAFTA winning short film. And that is why, because we can see the next generation are stumbling because the opportunities aren't there. We always have, opportunities for mentoring on our films. We always give a lot back. We have a charity, our Goldfinch Academy, which gives bursaries out to students as well. Currently just in the UK, but hopefully we can extend that. Our first flights movement, we're extending it fully global. And, it's making a short film as a young filmmaker, whether you're a producer or a director, is a really good starting, block for what can be, but you're not spending millions of pounds, you're spending thousands of pounds. And if we can give them grants, which are non-repayable, to help them to get them on their way, then they're learning what they're capable of doing. And I think that's super important. I really do. Practical experience is second to none.
Right. No, I think again, the pressures on the business, especially post COVID, and now especially with digitalization, I think absolutely agree with your observations about how that's really put pressure, and then a lot of players have had to sort of make amends and changes very rapidly, and that those who haven't been able to do that are really struggling then as a consequence.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's sad because there's some very good companies out there. You've even got huge companies like Chicken Soup for the Soul, who went bankrupt,
Technicolor, MPC.
Yeah. And Q Media, who went just before the pandemic. And what they tried to do was they tried to build huge businesses very quickly through buying other businesses. And you know what? I don't disagree with that. But they never saw a pandemic happening. And,
That's right.
Therefore, all of a sudden, you've bought two companies, Redbox and Screen Media, and all of a sudden, everything's collapsed. You're not going to get paid your debts. So what are you going to do? You've put out all of these MGs. You've got to pay all of these people for their content. You can't afford to do that. It's literally balancing your books. And to watch huge distributors like that go bust, that's frightening, And how many producers did that hit? How many minimum guarantees were given by these companies that weren't paid? Because I bet it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, and they all will have suffered. They will have made a film on the promise of that collateral.
That's right.
And that was A+ collateral when it was given. So they've probably borrowed against it, and they've got to pay that money back to whoever they've borrowed it off. That's an awful situation. And we've got situations as well with tax credits, and this is global, not just in the UK, where governments are taking longer to pay the tax credits and the tax rebates. Instead of it being 6 months, it's now a year. And if you've borrowed that money from the bank as a producer, because that helps your cash flow, but you've got an extra 6 months of interest, what are you going to do? You haven't even got enough headroom in the tax credit to do that. So that's putting the producer under threat as well. And I've been, because of my background, talking to the heads of wherever, the government and all the rest of it, to try and get some kind of sustainable process in place that enables the independent producer. I'm talking from an independent perspective alone. The studios are even struggling. Look, you've even got some of the studios in Hollywood who are they're basically eating each other up, aren't they? And they're doing that because and the amount of job losses in Hollywood is huge. And
Yeah.
that's because the studio model wasn't sustainable. There were too many people not making enough content to come out the other end, and they didn't evolve. But the studios are even turning to vertical content now. They
That's
were really sort of, no, we won't be doing that, and now they are, because they see it as, if you look at children and teenagers, it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes. That's the amount, and they're looking at here. They're not
that's
looking
right. That's
here. They're not going to cinemas. Some parts of the world, yes, they still do, but in America, they're not. They're
right.
looking at it like this, and they want content that's obvious and they can literally eat up all the time.
That's right. That's right. Real Short actually has, which is one of the vertical video companies, and drama series and micro dramas. 22 episodes a day is what
Wow.
young women consume on that platform. I mean,
Wow.
just thinking about that for a second, wow, 22 episodes a day. And these are all 1 minute episodes, but it's still a fair amount of investment, not just of time, but also of money
It
and
reminds me,
tokens.
from my geeky background, I was fascinated that writers such as Charles Dickens and William Thackeray, they didn't write their novels as a novel. They wrote it piecemeal for newspapers back in the day.
Oh,
So
incremental.
for instance, William Thackeray's Vanity Fair, which is about this thick as a book, it was chapters that were given out in a newspaper, and if they were popular, they got to write more, and they had to change the story up and all the rest of it. It's the same with vertical
It's the
series.
same exact
Exactly.
philosophy.
And if you read Vanity Fair, which is a brilliant book, you'll see that the character changes halfway through. She completely changes, and that's Becky, because she has to, in order to keep the audience that they get. And if we look at that, is, if you think about vertical series, they're often criticized, and micro dramas are often criticized because the acting's, oh my dear, is he coming in the room right now? A bit Dallas and Dynasty from back in the day. But if they're clever and they evolve, why not? I think it's brilliant filmmaking. I think it helps new filmmakers as well, because they can make these series and they can almost try out new ideas by vertical series. It could be quite culty as well.
And look, I mean, I think there are different styles of creative output. I mean, just animation itself has so many different styles, right?
Yes.
And the same thing about drama series, and that's absolutely legit, as long as consumers are also consuming it on one side.
Well, this is it. If you're making something that somebody wants to watch, then who am I to judge? Do I want to make it? I don't necessarily want to make it in that version, but could I try it in this version? Which, let's see whether the public likes that. Because what you like to watch on that, I might not like to, and vice versa. There's a big world out there.
Do you get ideas about vertical videos sent to you? The 25 that you get a week, 25 scripts. Are there some that
hardly any, which I'm really surprised about.
Wow.
And it's a shame, because we would love to see more of that. We've got a whole vertical series slate that we've created ourselves, between our group, and it's a bit different, because obviously with our Dreamtown Horror Slant, if you think about it, there's not a lot of vertical series that are true horror. They're more the gore, and they're more that kind of slasher kind of movie.
That's right.
So trying to build something in, we've created, we've got about 8 ideas that we've greenlit internally, that we're just trying to decide which one we're going to go with first. Really excited about it, because you're talking, it's almost like guerrilla filmmaking. Instead of having 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, you're going to have a week or 8 days to get this nailed. And that to us is quite interesting, is how can we speed up the process of not just the filming side of it, but also the post-production side of things as well.
Right.
So that is building a very cool, neat team that is very agile. And that is what we need. And I think with this, you need 2 editors that are doing each series back to back, and they're familiar with that kind of work. And somebody who does trailer content, somebody who does commercials, somebody who can do sizzles, somebody who can think outside the box is what you need as an editor on the vertical series, because each one needs to start with a hook and end with a hook. So one of the best examples I've seen lately or in the last few years in box sets on Netflix is Succession. So Succession, the start of every episode is 5 or 6 minutes of the last episode, effectively, just re-edited in a slightly different form. So it's treating the audience like they need educated, that they can't remember what's happened, even though people sit and watch the whole of the box sets back to back. But if you look at each episode, I would say there's 10 to 20% of each episode that's repeated in the next episode.
Interesting.
Yeah. And that is because if you keep reminding the audience about what they liked or what the story was in the previous episode, they're going to still want to watch more and more and more. And that's what the vertical series needs to do. It needs to have a start and an end that entices you to go on and on and on. And also, the fewer characters, the better.
Yes. Again, yes. I actually spoke to the CEO of a company in Burbank, Hollywood, and they actually create a lot of these short series, web series, getting into also vertical videos. They have it's incredible. Their entire office actually is a massive set. Right, there's a on one corner is a court, another corner is a prison, another third corner is a hospital.
Wow.
And because you're shooting only the vertical frame, you don't need a lot of stuff around to actually sort of give the impression. But they don't want a lot of the actors and the crew to leave their premises. A lot of that shoot actually happens on prem. And it's just very, very capital efficient, time efficient, resource efficient. So again, some of these, look, I think the craft is getting reinvented, because on one side the gains, the financial gains or the revenue making is going through a tunnel. And during this particular phase, it's back to the basics of like how is this a great business? How can you keep costs under control? And I think what I'm hearing from you is that your philosophy is from day one been that.
Yes.
Just from where you come from, in your earlier
cash
background.
is king. If you can't control your cash flow, you're dead. And
so, yeah. Kirsty, I was actually curious about, and I'm sure a lot of listeners are going to be listening to this particular answer with bated breath, which is, the no pressure. The 25 projects the 25 ideas that you get every week. The last couple that you and the investment committee and your team sort of looked at said, oh yes, like straight off, right? We are going to back this project, right? What was it? I mean, if you can talk a little bit about, like just the either it was just an exciting idea, or the business plan was great, or the filmmakers and their selections of the. I just want you to talk a little bit about that part.
The last one that we actually picked that has been made and is now ready for distribution is the one that is now called From London with Love. And it is really unusual. The reason I'm mentioning it is it's a really unusual project for us to go ahead with. We were approached to do a co-production of this project because it hailed from Europe, and they wanted to shoot it in the UK. And it's a romantic black comedy, right, with music. It's a musical romantic black comedy. Now, I don't know about you, but I haven't seen many of those recently.
No,
and I also would never pick one. And the commerciality of it, they sort of put it in a La La Land kind of category, but it's not La La Land. It's not. There is a dance scene in the middle of London, but it was written by a guy who's quite a famous actor and musician from where he comes from, and he was directing it. And that's again a no-no. The guy who's going to play the lead is also going to sing it all, and he's also going to direct it. Like, wow, that's like a whole conundrum of things going on. But the way it was packaged really well when it came to us, but also it was really well packaged. But also we spent a long time getting to know him and also the team that he wanted to bring to the party. And we're still working with them really closely. We've got a lot of offers in for the film. It works. It works really well. We had a lot of input with him on some things he didn't agree with, some things he agreed with. You know, bear in mind it's his project at the end of the day. So for us, it was the full package, and there was a lot of red flags there that were dissipated into green flags. That was really cool. The one that I'm really excited that we haven't greenlit, though, at the moment is I was very fortunate to be asked to be a mentor at a very cool writers' retreat. And I'd never done it before. I've mentored people, but I've never been part of a whole retreat thing. It was an amazing experience. And one of the projects that was there, which is being currently edited at the moment, was just when something just hits you and you just think that ting, it ticks this, it ticks this, it ticks this. And this person is a writer. She's not a producer, she's not a director. She has done acting in the past, but she's a writer. But she's not even a screenplay writer, she's a novel writer. But by God, she can write screenplays. And this is a Christmas movie. Now, we've done EP work on Christmas movies in the past, and they can make a lot of money if they're done correctly. This has every good thing about a Christmas movie. So that is one of the ones that I'm really excited by. And if I hadn't gone on the writer's retreat, I would never have seen it. And because she would never have known that that's the avenue she needed to do, was to submit it to us, because that's not what she does. And I think it's looking for, I made an analogy to somebody on that retreat, and I said, it's looking for the gold in the sand. And it's sometimes you've got to look at it from a different perspective to catch the light, to see the gold. And that is what I'm always looking for. It doesn't matter whether I'm talking to, it's storytelling, isn't it? It's finding good stories and making them into something that we can all enjoy, but also that we're not losing money on as well. And I think, at this, it's really exciting. I feel that we're at a turning point where we can really do something amazing in this industry, because creativity has never been more accessible or more valuable. We're not chasing that, going back to the gold analogy, we're not chasing the old gold rush. We're actually building a new one. And that, to me, is amazing. With any industry that's going through changes, what's going to come out the other side? And that's where the real honey is in all of this. It's almost like a hive full of bees that are going to produce this amazing honey at the end of the day. That's how I see it. I found it. I love creativity in industry, which is why I specialized in tax when I was in accountancy. And it's making things able to work that you never thought were able to work. And that is what makes a good producer. The person who can solution find rather than go, oh dear, I can't do that, and just look for problems. Problems are opportunities, and they're nothing other than that. That's how I look at life in any event. I don't know whether anybody else does, but that's how I look at life.
Kirsty, I was also curious about Goldfinch International. There is a big sort of push to go into new markets. You talked about Asia. Can you give us a little bit background of that initiative, and also what kind of partnerships are you looking for, or what kind of projects are you looking for as part of that?
Goldfinch International came because Phil was spending a lot of time in the Middle East and also in Indonesia. And he got introduced to two gentlemen, Fadi and Justin, who completely separately. But then when he was speaking to people, he was finding that our model of financing in the UK and America and parts of Europe just wasn't being adopted over there. some instances there was no tax credits available because the governments hadn't put any in place, or they were looking to but needed some guidance on it. Or thirdly, that some jurisdictions just didn't loan against it or cash flow it as part of the finance plan, for whatever reason, and tended to just fully fund a project and then wait for any tax rebate to come back later. So when Phil was talking to various people, heads of government and all the rest of it, about how we did things, there seemed to be a general consensus that this should be something that should be considered over there. So all of a sudden, Philip's been shaking hands with the heads of state in various places, and we're being called in to help consult and also to advise. Because obviously, if the governments want to help the producers or encourage tourism and inward investment through external third-party producers coming to film in the countries, being able to have a tax credit or rebate that can be cash flowed is huge, because that makes an easier decision for a producer. Now then you go, well, who's going to supply the finance for that? UK banks aren't, American banks aren't, because they're not over there. They don't have the experience of that. They don't know how it works in other countries. So the plan that came about was, why don't we raise a fund to help the governments and help the industries in those jurisdictions, which is what we're currently doing. And we've already got some funding in place by a couple of family offices. But it's obviously going to be easier the bigger the fund is. So the objective is to get up to $100 million, and we're already starting to do stuff. And it's also putting systems and checks and measures. I mentioned, I think earlier, about me adopting the Completion Bonders Handbook, and it's adopting that in those jurisdictions to suit the way of filming in those jurisdictions and looking after the cash flow of the people that are involved over there. So that's what we're doing on Goldfinch International, which is getting a lot of eyes, and it's very exciting. And I
it's
think a lot.
largely.
Go on.
Sorry, is that largely debt financing?
It's also attracting equity financing as a result of that, and also attracting distribution companies over that side of the world. And what we're finding is it's almost like reverse engineering. It's like coming from, well, we already had it, but if you had it, you could actually engineer an awful lot more content that way, but also drive a lot more business through, if your tax credit isn't being utilized by external producers and only by internal producers, why not? Because you're going to bring more business into your country. So it's coming from that angle more than anything else.
This is great. And again, this is such a timely conversation. So Vitrina is partnering with the government of India and with the Confederation of Indian Industry for a financing summit that is happening in Mumbai on 1st and 2nd December. We'd love to have Goldfinch represented there, Kirsty. That'd be great.
We would love to be represented there, and I think it's really, from an international perspective and from your side of the world, I think these kind of models are really interesting because you've never had to contend with them before, and also how they can actually springboard other investment is really cool as well. Going back to what I said earlier about some of our high net worth and family office cross-collateralizing between equity and debt, this is a way to do that in those parts of the world, which I think is super.
Fantastic. Looking forward to that interaction as well. There are so many aspects that we talked about today, actually, Kirsty, which just bring out, not just all the pressure points that exist, but also the opportunities that are sort of opening up. You tell a really, really great story about the journey, as well as, again, in the art of storytelling. This actually is power packed with all the good stuff, and all the stuff that should be bettered, and also all the stuff to look forward to. Kirsty, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Again, I really appreciate you sort of explaining the business models and your practices as transparently as you have today, and as eloquently that you've actually sort of presented both your company, your work, and some of your projects. Thank you so much for talking to the Vitrina community.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I hope I haven't rambled on on things that people don't want to hear about. I hope some of it has resonated with somebody out there. And it's been an absolute honor and a privilege to be part of this, Atul. So thank you very, very much for having me on.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.